Hello and welcome back. I'm Jennifer Thompson, one of the festival co-founders and a co-host for today. If you are just joining us, welcome. This is our final event today of the third annual 2021 San Diego Writers Festival, and we are thrilled to be featuring this next event. It's going to be amazing. Contributing authors and editors of How to Write a Mystery, a handbook for mystery writers of America, including Lee Child, Laurie R King, Nyren, and Frankie Y Bailey. And by the way, it's a handbook by mystery writers of America, also for mystery writers of America. We're going to be giving away 10 copies of that book right now. So is it right now or is it in 4 minutes? I think it's actually in 4 minutes. At 5:30, we're going to drop that link in the comments. So be sure and look for that so you can get a free copy. And now it is my pleasure to thank our sponsor of this next event, Sally Buffington. When newly engaged Sally Buffington is introduced to Craigville, she meets an expansive Cape Cod cottage that is virtually a family member itself. She quickly finds herself competing for airtime among the talkative, assured band of brothers and her new mother-in-law, the cottage's lively and confounding matriarch. Sally's boundless curiosity guides her to explore life through the creative lens of her camera and her pen. She writes with a whimsical candor that is both honest and humorous. A place like this reveals the beauty of Cape Cod and shows us that sometimes the simplest of moments are often the ones that bring us the most lasting joy. You can order a copy of Sally's book, A Place Like This, on her website, sallybuffington.com, and we'll place a link in the comments. And I couldn't be happier to introduce the moderators of this panel, two of my favorite people, my cohorts, co-hosts, co-founder Marnie Friedman, and our Director of Operations, Anastasia Hipkins. Hi, ladies.
Hello. Hello. I can't believe
We've had a
last.
I know. And you guys are like running on steam. I'm running on steam, and you're going to go into another panel, and I can't wait. Should we what?
Should we bring our panelists on?
If you'd like, I'm gonna read both of your bios. So let's bring it in, so they know what badasses you ladies are.
What kind
Bring
of
'em in.
badassery we?
What kind of badassery did we got going on here at the San Diego Writers Festival? Hello, friends, and welcome. Marnie Friedman is a screenwriter, playwright, and award-winning author, writing coach, co-founder, and director of programming here at the San Diego Writers Festival. Her play, Two Goldsteins on Acid, was made into the film Playing Mona Lisa. Marnie's one-man show, A Jewish Joke, was produced off-Broadway in 2018 and she is an editor of Shaking the Tree, short, brazen memoir. Marnie has 2 award-winning books, 7 essential writing tools, and Permission to Roar for female thought leaders ready to write their book. I have both, and they are fantastic. Get a copy for yourself. You can find Marnie at marniefriedman.com, a writing hub to help writers find their authentic voice. And there's a link to Warwick's if you would like to buy her books in the comments. You know the drill. Anastasia Hipkins is an author, editor, and narrative nonfiction storyteller. In addition to serving as director of operations for us here at the San Diego Writers Festival, she is a producer, board member, and frequent performer for So Say We All, a literary nonprofit dedicated to helping people tell their stories and tell them better. Her first novel, Blurred Fates, will be released in June 2022. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer.
For all that you ladies do.
Oh, thank you. Marnie and I are so grateful for this opportunity to talk about how to write a mystery with these panelists.
This is an incredible group of panelists. Such mind power we have here. I almost feel the electricity. But first, before we speak to them, we're going to read their bios real quick. Frankie Y. Bailey, PhD, is a professor in the School of Criminal Justice, University at Albany. She studies crime history and crime in mass media, popular culture, and material culture. And you'll see it, all that shows up in her books. It's gorgeous the way she does it. She's the author of 5 mysteries featuring amateur sleuth Lizzie Stewart and 2 police procedurals novels featuring Albany police detective Hannah McCabe.
Lee Child is one of the world's leading thriller writers. He was born in Coventry, raised in Birmingham, and now lives in New York. It is said one of his novels featuring his hero, Jack Reacher, is sold somewhere in the world every 9 seconds. His books consistently achieve the #1 slot on bestseller lists around the world and have sold more than 100 million copies. He is the recipient of many awards, most recently Author of the Year at the 2019 British Book Awards. He was appointed CBE in the 2019 Queen's Birthday Honors. His latest book, The Sentinel, written with his brother Andrew Child, came out in October 2020. And Better Off Dead, the 26th in the Jack Reacher series, will be released on October 26th, 2021.
26, man, that Jack Reacher. He's got reach. Next, I have the honor of introducing Laurie R King, New York Times bestselling author of 18 Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes novels, 5 Kate Martinellis, 2 Stuyvesant Grays, 5 standalones, various short stories and novellas. And this brilliant woman has edited a number of anthologies of nonfiction works. Okay, listen to some of the awards she's won. The Agatha, the Anthony, Edgar, Lambda, Wolf, McCavity, Creasy Dagger, and Romantic Times Career Achievement Awards. She has an honorary doctorate and is a Baker Street irregular. Her latest book, Castle Shade, was released in June of this year.
And our fourth panelist is Neil Nyren. Neil retired at the end of 2017 as EVP, Associate Publisher, and Editor-in-Chief of G.P. Putnam's Sons, and is the winner of the 2017 Ellery Queen Award from the Mystery Writers of America. Among the writers of crime and suspense with whom he has worked are Tom Clancy, Clive Cussler, John Sanford, C.J. Box, Robert Crace, Carl Hyacin, Daniel Silva, Jack Higgins, Frederick Forsyth, Ken Follett, Jonathan Kellerman, Ed McBain, and Ace Atkins. He now writes about crime fiction and publishing for Crime Reads, The Big Thrill, The Third Degree, Book Trib, and Publishers Weekly, among other publications.
Welcome to the San Diego Writers Festival. We are so glad you are all here.
Are we there?
So what Anastasia and I'm just going to launch in. What we loved about this book was that it was filled with all this really specific, solid advice. And then right next to it was the permission to completely ignore it. Lee Child, I have to say to you, that was the best intro to a book ever. And I walked away as someone who was not a mystery writer, wanting to write a mystery. It was just that generous of spirit and that inspiring. This panel is a panel like no other, filled with really brilliant people, every single one of them. And we're so excited to start this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. For me, this panel and this book perfectly fit our theme, because a group of successful writers sharing what they've learned and paving the way for others, that generosity of spirit is exactly what the world needs. And our theme is what the world needs now. The other thing about this book is that though it is directed at writers of mystery, so much of the content applies to any writer. For me, this is a book for any writer. And I think it's also a book for readers of mysteries who want to know how the books they love were created, which leads me to my very first question. With 70 contributors and topics ranging from crafting compelling characters all the way through to book reviews and understanding legal considerations. While reading it, I kept thinking about how it all came together and the time and the logistics involved. And I wondered if we could start, Lee and Laurie, if you could share with us, how did this book come to be?
Well, I'll start with that. Because Laurie asked me to do it, and I was very keen to do it because MWA itself, we've got to remember the roots and the purpose of that organization, which started a long time ago towards the end of the 1940s, when it was basically a sort of blue-collar organization. It was really a trades union. It was about the overall message that it had at the time was that crime does not pay enough. And you know, back then people worked incredibly hard. I noticed in the intro, you sort of think of me as some kind of veteran because I got 26 books. I mean, people were doing 26 books a year back then. You had whole magazines written by the same guy under 10 different pseudonyms. It was very hard work. And so the organization was really about helping people, helping the members in a practical way. And we've tried to keep that up. And Laurie will tell you more now because she was head of the publications committee. And so she can pick it up from there. But my interest was just to say, we need to help people, especially now. Publishing is very tough. Competition for entertainment hours is very tough. How could we help? And so that's where I started from.
Yeah, I had the great position of being in the publications committee. I was brought on in MWA, and among other things, we do anthologies at least once and sometimes twice a year. And when I came in, I thought, you know, one thing that I so treasured when I was first starting to write was the wisdom that I got from the early MWA writing handbooks. There was one in 1984 that I used a lot. There was a later one in the late 90s that was edited by Sue Grafton. And I thought, we are a different world now, and MWA needs to embrace the new world and to show how writing is both the same and very different. The writing community is different. The writing itself aims at excellence, whether you're talking about 1945 or 2021. So I wanted to do a new handbook and put it in front of the committee, and they said, yes, you go ahead. So I said, okay. And we talked about the best possible names for the cover. Who would shape this thing in a way that would be really exciting and alive and a community effort? And who understands Mystery Writers of America in a profound way? And we all looked at each other and said, what do you think Lee Child would do it? and he did. So there we are.
So how did you decide which people were going to write about which topics? Did they pick their own topic, or did you guys assign them, or were they things that they'd already written and you were compiling them?
Well, all of the above. I mean, another bonus for me was that Laurie and I are in very different corners of the genre. So there's not that much crossover between us, but we've been friends for possibly, 20 years. And I love working with her on anything. Yeah. So I was very happy to work with her on this, which was about saying, Laurie, you figure it out. And so she basically did all the hard work of listing what did we need, who might be a good fit for that. And I just have to place on record, out of the 70 people, including Neil that's here, including Frankie, I mean, these are just really smart people.
Yes.
But more than that, incredibly generous. You know, it's not nothing to write a decent essay that is going to be out there for a long time and possibly guiding people. That it's difficult to do that. It takes time. And they all said, yeah, absolutely. They all said, immediately agreed. And I think that shows through in the book. There's so much energy, there's so much passion. There is so much warmth and generosity. You know, there is no reason why any of these people should have done this, but they did, because it's very typical of the mystery community. They are the nicest people you will ever meet. And, you know, that's a universal truth. And it's really the hidden bonus about becoming a mystery writer, is that you work with such fabulous people. And as you can see from this response, 70 people said, yeah.
It definitely shows.
What Lee doesn't know is that I threatened everyone to send Jack Reacher after them.
It definitely shows through, that generosity of spirit. We read it, we were floored by it, and someone that was thinking of giving up writing, you know, handed it over, just like, read this first. Another question that we have is, members of our audience may just be getting started as mystery writers. And so the next few questions are for you guys. This could be a question for you all, or maybe to Neil, since you discussed this in your essay. Neil is a legendary editor, writer. If you don't know his work, it's amazing. But the question is specifically, what's the difference between suspense, mystery, and thriller?
Sure. Well, at heart, mysteries are about a puzzle. As I say, something happens, a crime is committed, it's usually a murder, and the protagonist has to weave his or her way through all sorts of clues and suspects to finally arrive at a solution. And it's a little bit more of a cerebral endeavor, and the key question associated with it is, who did it? But with thrillers, it's really about adrenaline. Something bad happens. There's a certain promise of a lot more terrible things are going to happen, unless somebody can prevent them. And it could be the loss of somebody's life, or it could be as big as the fate of the entire world. And the hero can be just an average Joe, or it can be a superhero. But like whatever the case is, it's the adrenaline that drives the book, that chase, that scramble. And the key question is, what happens next? And suspense, for me, is really so close to thriller as to not really make that much of a difference. Because, in a suspense novel, the suspense is high because you're at a constant high level of worry or anticipation because you don't know what's going to happen. And, that's what thriller is all about. It's worth noting, though, that, of course, plenty of pure mystery novels have lots of suspense in them. Laurie's novels have lots of suspense in them. And there's also a lot of thrillers that have puzzles that have to be solved in order to move forward. So really, it all mixes together. It's pick the combination that works for you.
And there can be, as I was reading the book, I was thinking about the fact that there's mysteries in memoir sometimes. There's mysteries, so it's a cross-genre kind of themes. One of the things I noticed is several writers in the book discuss the difference between story and plot. And I loved Hallie Efron quoting Walter Mosley when she said, "Story is what happened, plot is the order in which it's revealed to the reader." And I was wondering if, and this is a question to anyone who wants to start, how would you define story and plot when it comes to writing a mystery and specifically, and do you think it's different in mysteries than in other genres?
I think I'll start with that because I was just thinking before we started, there's a section in here that was written by Deb Crombie about plotting. And it's interesting because the difference between plot and story are often reversed, so that the E.M. Forster definition is not the one that Deb was using or that I was used. So I think that when I, as an editor, was going through this book, and someone would refer to plot and story, I sort of said, why don't you put a little bit in there of definition so that the reader can know how you are using it? When I use the word plot, I'm referring to the mechanics. I'm referring to how all of the pieces fit together, and you turn it this way and it comes out that way. Whereas the story is the overall, for me, the story is the overall, the plot machinery and the setting and the character and the motivations and the subplots and all that, which is exactly the opposite from the way E.M. Forster talks about it. But so long as we're all understanding the way we're using the words, it doesn't really matter. So the rest of you agree or no?
Yeah. When I think of story, I think of what I would tell someone if they said, what is this book about? And my plots, I'm a plotter, so I spend so much time on that. Sometimes the story changes as I'm going about the plotting.
So Frankie, since you're talking, your essay was one of my absolute favorites.
Oh, thank you.
It had a freedom to it, and it gave specific ideas for writers to think about inclusivity and diversity. And I wondered if you would share some of the things that you put in that essay for the audience.
Yeah, I was trying to speak to people, readers who might come to that chapter looking for, how do I do diversity? Which is what we talk about in academia. How do you do diversity? But I was trying to make it as stress-free as possible. are less stressing than it might otherwise be, because some people would like to do it, but they say, I don't know how I do it. I might get it wrong. People get angry at me. And I was trying to point out that you probably are going to get it wrong in the
I thought that
beginning.
was so powerful that you
we
said
all do.
people are going to get mad.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things, there's a debate about what type of character you can write. I mean, who should you be able to create as a character? So I was saying, in effect, you start slow. If you have a dog walker, for example, you can have all kinds of clients for that dog walker, and you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to create those characters, or figuring out their bio, or really all you really need is a secret, because they're suspects. So you're doing that, but you don't have to go too deep. And you probably wouldn't want to start by making your protagonist someone that you're not, without doing a lot of research. And I wouldn't suggest that at all. I think starting slow is probably best, but realizing that you're probably going to get some things wrong and some people will be upset with you.
But I thought that was great permission. It was the freedom to try and fall on your face, which I loved. We get so stuck in, I can't do it, and what if I offend people? And this essay just cuts through all that noise really well.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about that because I have a diverse cast of characters. And right now I'm working on my sixth Lizzie book, and she and John Quinn are going to meet his family, and his family are members of the Comanche Nation. I mean, I know nothing about Comanches, and so I'm going to have to do a lot of research. But I mean, I just sort of pulled that out of thin air when I was writing that second book, and now I've got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Love that.
Picking up on something else you said, Frankie, you said you're a plotter. And I wanted to get to this question. Throughout the book, there are references, almost every essay felt like plotters and pantsers, or sometimes the pantsers were called organic writers. And there were a few hybrids in the mix, people who said, I start this and then I go to that. And again, there's so many different ways to approach it. But I was wondering if all of you would be willing to tell us how you personally write a mystery.
I love Lee Child's take on this. I wonder if he would start with it.
Yeah, I loved the contrast between you and Jeffrey Beaver. That was great.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make the book extremely honest in the sense that there is no one way to do it. There's no 10 ways to do it and no 100 ways to do it. Everybody finds their own way. And I did not want people to feel that if they weren't doing it one specific way, that was hopeless and they would never succeed. And so I deliberately wanted me and Jeff Deaver to be back to back in the book, where Jeff is the most notorious plotter. I mean, his outlines are longer than my books. And I am the complete opposite. I'm such an organic writer, I should be on sale at Whole Foods. And for me to go back to that previous question, what's the difference between story and plot? To me, story is what happens to people. And so typically I just start with a person and something's happening to him or her. And then I figure out, all right, what happens next? What could be waiting around the corner? And I literally have no idea what is going to happen in the book. Sometimes I have a kind of phrase, or once or twice it's been a line of dialogue. Once or twice it's been a visual image of something that I have a vague sense I might be working toward. But other than that, I start at the beginning and I just keep going until the book appears to be finished. And at that point, I know what it's about. And editors have a problem with that a little bit. I mean, Neil was never my editor, but I wish he had been sometimes, because there's a conversation to be had. Sometimes my editor would say, I love this, but wouldn't it be better if that happened after this? And I say, yeah, probably would, but it didn't.
This is a question, though, I've been wondering all day. We've been talking about you guys all day. I'm so excited to meet you. Do you think, because you have this natural sense of story, of course, it's because being such a voracious reader, or your time in television, how do you is it within you intrinsically?
Yeah, I really had to think about it to write the essay that I did for the book, and it's a bit glib and it's a bit superficial just to say that I wing it and hope that it turns out all right. Because what I realized when I was really thinking about it for the essay was that we have all read thousands and thousands of books. If you're intending to be a mystery writer or want to be a mystery writer, we can assume that you love the genre and you love it, therefore you've read a lot of it. And therefore, just relax. It's all in there. You've read 1,000 books or 10,000 books, and you build up a subliminal sense of the rhythms and the beats, and when do you need something? When do you need something to happen? When do you need a cliffhanger? If you relax and let it happen subliminally, you are, in fact, following an outline. It's just a kind of generic, culture-wide outline. And it becomes very easy to do in my experience.
How about you, Laurie? I know from having read the book that you are an organic writer, but can you tell the audience about it?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the book. I normally am much closer to Lee in my style. I am organic. And I rarely know where something is going until I get there. It means that my rewrite is a big part of my writing process, because the basic structure of the book in the first like 300 pages then needs to be made into a proper novel so that it makes sense to other people. But it also depends on the kind of book I'm doing. And the one, for example, the one I'm working on now is not a series novel. It is structured in a very complicated way. And so I need to have a very clear idea of the steps along the way. And I don't outline the whole thing because my brain simply doesn't work that way. And that, I hope, is something that comes out in this book from beginning to end, is you have to find the system that works for you. But the way my brain works, I can't make sense of a written down outline. I don't envision things that way. But if I have the basic part of a story in mind, it gives me a kind of timeline that I can write down and that I can think about as I am writing, so that it's sort of, as you say, sort of halfway. I'm a hybrid for some books, not for all books, but for some.
Yeah, and that I found as an editor. I mean, I worked with people on every part of the spectrum between plotting and pantser, like simply every gradation you can possibly think of. I did a lot of books with Ken Follett, and both on his suspense novels and his sagas. And Ken would give me an outline beforehand of easily 100 pages. Would decide to be even longer than that. And when manuscript itself would come in, it would match that outline exactly. Beat for beat. Everything would be in there like that. And on the other hand, I've edited plenty of people. Clearly, they were starting at one point, and then they veered off somewhere else, and then somewhere else. And sometimes the messages are still there. There was a book I did, a big forest fire, and it was a cabin. And there's this mysterious figure in the cabin, and I kept trying to figure out who that figure was and why that person was there. And I asked the author about it, and he laughed and said, "Oh, he was in my first draft. I just forgot to take him out." That happens a lot.
But have you, since you're someone who, watched so many writers process, did you find that one was more effective than the other, or it was really just individual for each writer?
It was purely what worked for them. It's exactly what Laurie said. Some people just feel much happier just letting it go and letting it grow by itself and taking it to places they didn't know they were going to. That's what makes it exciting for them. And others, really, they want to know exactly what that ending is before they begin the book, because then they want to know exactly how to work up to that ending in a very systematic fashion. And it all depends upon your particular mindset and what style of writing works best for you. And I find there is no one best way. It really is whatever works for you.
Did you find that editing was simpler or easier with outliners, or not necessarily?
When it came to the actual manuscript itself, it wasn't easier one way or the other, because then I'm just really dealing with what's there on the page and what the writer's given and what needs to get fixed and what doesn't need to get fixed. And however it is that they got to that stage didn't really concern me because that was their business, not mine. Mine was, I'm dealing with the written manuscript, and now let's see what the book wants to be and how it meets its full potential, and what needs to be done to reach it.
And as Lee said, that the outline is there, but it's just in your head. I mean, those of us who don't work to an external outline, it's there, and you know when you're going off it. But
how detailed, when you say it's there, how detailed is it in your head?
You can't shine too bright a light because it'll die.
Yeah, mine is not detailed at all, but it's about the it's not about the external appearance, it's about the skeleton. That's what I can see. And it does come from television as well. I did, in my previous career, I did 40,000 hours of television, which makes you it turns your DNA, the rhythm of what the audience wants is cast iron by that point. And so I always know, there has to be a good line here, or there has to be a trick or a reveal or something. And it's absolutely certain, I know that. I don't know what it needs to be, but that just happens. As long as you know you're coming up to that junction, something will pop into your head.
So picking up on something you just said, Lee, this is again a question for our beginner writers in our audience. What is the difference between a reveal and a twist, and how do red herrings fit in?
Well, I have, red herrings are fun because they are, what they sound like. They're there to fool the reader, throw them off, give them a false direction. So that part is all good fun. And I have literally no idea what the difference is between a twist and a reveal. I would kind of guess that a twist is smaller than a reveal or a slightly different nature. But these terms of art, I bet we'll ask Neil, because the three of us that are writers, I don't think we really know or care, what these very specific terms are. All we're trying to do is get through a book. And if Neil was to say to me, if I say there's a great twist in chapter 5 and Neil says to me, no, that's a reveal, I'm not going to argue with him.
No, it's like with story and plot. People's definitions actually differ on this as a term of art, which is why I never pay much attention to what the terms of art actually are. To me, sort of reveal is a new piece of information that has been presented and it's going to affect the narrative from then on. But a twist is something that causes you to recalibrate everything that you've already read throughout the entire book. Like, The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis was dead all along, right? So you have to look at every single scene to see how that affected it. Planet of the Apes, you thought that wasn't a foreign planet? Charlton Heston on the beach, you damn dirty apes. It's like, you looked at everything else and it was completely different because the Statue of Liberty was there. So to me, that's the difference, but I certainly am not dogmatic about it.
But that makes a lot of sense, what you just said. It illuminates, for me at least, the difference. I wanted to ask Frankie, because we haven't asked her about, you're a plotter, correct?
Yeah, but
your process.
I wish I could do what Laurie and Lee do, because I'm trying to write a historical thriller set in 1939, and it has to cover a whole year because of real life events, and I don't know. The structure has been driving me crazy, and finally I figured out I needed to have a frame story that deals with that. But anyway, yeah, I'm a plotter because I do research. I love doing research, and I use the research for brainstorming, and so I have to figure out what I need to know. Particularly in the Lizzie Stewart novels, because she's a crime historian, as I am. I walk through everything she does, because there's the story in the past and the story in the present. And so I go out in the field and do what she does, and then I insert my crime in whatever I'm finding. So that's why I have to do that. With police procedural, there are only certain ways that police detectives go about investigating things. So I need to know the manner of death, and I need to know the twist. Dr. Doug Lowell just gave me some really great information for something I was working on the other day. but I mean, logically, I need to know what's going to happen for either of those types of books.
It's fascinating that you brought up 1939 because I think that's one of the most fascinating years.
Oh,
I'm
yeah, it is.
slightly obsessed with 1939.
Yeah.
I also was wondering for you and the work that you do, how does the work that you do, being a crime historian, how does it impact your plots?
Well, I have lots of real life crimes to draw on. So in all four of the Lizzie books set in the United States, the first was in Cornwall, England, and London. But with the four other books and the one coming up, they all have a reference to a real life crime that I changed the facts of. In fact, I ended up creating that character because I had written my dissertation and I had, it was about my hometown of Danville, Virginia, and I changed that to Gallagher in the novel. But I wanted to, I came across a lynching that I didn't know was a lynching at first because of the way it happened.
Right.
It began as a domestic violence thing, and the man ended up killing a police officer, and the people in the crowd set the house on fire. So it was technically a lynching. And I wanted to have Lizzie's grandmother be there when that happened as a 12-year-old child, and then have Lizzie go there later to try to figure out what really happened. And so I changed all the facts. So that's what I do with the real life things I'm looking at.
Awesome.
So I'm going to use the word twist in a slightly different manner now. So I know that one of the questions that was posed in the book was, what piece of writing advice do you wish you'd had at the beginning of your career? And I'm going to twist that around a little bit and just ask you, what was the best writing advice that you've had at any point in your career? And feel free to throw in any bad advice that you've gotten to that you don't want people to avoid.
I think the best advice that I ever got, it sounds very, very prosaic and it sounds kind of unglamorous, but you've got to remember this is a job as well as everything else. I mean, I love the creativity. I love the joy of creating the book, and I respect the tradition and all of that good stuff, but it is fundamentally a job. So the best advice I ever got was, don't get it right, get it written.
Will you tell the truck driver's block story?
Oh yeah, I mean, people talk about writer's block, and you know, I don't think that's a real thing. I completely understand that people don't want to go to work. So I say, is there such a thing as nurse's block or truck driver's block? You don't want, you know, a truck driver doesn't necessarily want to go to work that day, but he has to. So he shows up and he gets in the cab and he puts the preheater on and he hits the button and the engine starts up and the muscle memory just gets him into it and he's away for the day. And it's the same thing with writing. I mean, writer's block, I'm sure there's occasional really deep psychological issues with some people that prevent them from working, but generally speaking, you just don't want to work that day, but you've got to. So you do it like everybody else. You put your ass in the chair and you do the work. And so I'm a very sort of pragmatic nuts and bolts type of writer. So yeah, don't take a fancy sounding excuse. Just do your job that day and get it written, because you can always fix a bad page. You cannot fix a blank page.
I have a question about voice. I don't know, Anastasia, do you have a question?
Well, wait, I wanted to hear the best advice from all.
Oh, yes. Go for it. Yes.
Laurie, how about you?
I think I have to go with Lee of just, you know, getting it down there. I think that a variation on that is all first drafts are crap. That, you know, you assume that your first draft is going to be absolutely unreadable. And when you assume that, it stops you from worrying about how awful it is and how it's not going anywhere and how the people are dead on the page and it makes no sense. Because if you have words on the page, you can fix them. And in the process of putting them on there, even though you know they're the wrong words, you begin to suspect where the right words are. So, just, I have days where I don't write, and I don't call them, I don't call them writer's block. I just call them, I'd really rather clean the oven. But at the end of the day, you got a clean oven, and you can think about it while you're cleaning the oven, and then go back to work the next day. So, but yeah, I think that all first drafts are crap, but they're there.
I often say I do some of my best writing walking the dog, because if I just let my mind kind of go, that some of the intractable problems that I've been trying to pound away on the keyboard to make go away, they suddenly clear up. So,
yeah. I think that my most valuable piece of advice, not necessarily what I've been given, since I'm not a writer, but I've given to lots of writers, is, whatever works. They come to me anguished about something or other. Does this work? Is this good or not? And I said, if it works, use it. If it doesn't work, throw it out. Like prologues. Some people hate prologues. Some people wonder whether they can use them or not. And I said, if the prologue works for your book, then use it. Some people like multiple points of view. Some people think that's much too confusing. You should just have one. And I said, it's whatever works for your book, or voice. First person voice, lots of people like it because that I voice can take you very intimately into the narrator's head. But other people think that limiting everything to just what is in the narrator's head is totally crazy pants. So you got to use the third person. And as far as I'm concerned, you should use whatever works for you. And that's really, it's my only rule for publishing, whatever works for you.
And how about you, Frankie? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking I've gotten all of this good advice and I ignore most of it. So, on any given day, I know that the first draft is going to be crap, but I can't let it go. That's the problem with being a plotter, that I'm a very slow writer. I go back, I read what I wrote the day before I can move on. I rewrite that first 50 pages over and over and over again before I can move further. So, and I would like to get it out the door faster, but by the time I get to the first draft, or the first draft is done, I've actually edited that first draft multiple times. So it's like I'm getting to the second draft when I'm doing that. So, this is great advice and I give it to other people, but sometimes I don't follow it myself just because of the way I write.
As with all,
I'm honoring my process.
I think that's a very important point. To combine what Frankie just said and what Neil said, it's got to be the product of one mind and one imagination. If you really want to do something, you think this is what needs to happen now, and then you think, oh yeah, but Stephen King doesn't do that, and Lee Child does it later in the book, and John Grisham does it earlier in the book. As soon as you start thinking like that, you are lost. It has to be the product of one imagination. Then it has got a beating heart, and then it might work. If you do it to satisfy theoretical points of view from other people, it will never work.
So I have a question for Laurie. In doing the research, I heard you say something that's maybe to all of you about the state of where we're at with mystery writing. And I heard Laurie say that right now we expect more of our crime novels. We demand that they have an emotional truth as well as the puzzle. And I wondered if you would speak to that. And is there any emotional truth right now that you're longing to get out there? Is that a huge question, like too much?
Yeah. Laurie, pour your heart out to this.
You know what? The truth is, we could talk to each one of you for an hour, and I can barely contain myself just to keeping it to one question, but I'm trying.
I think that was probably in a debate about golden age mysteries as opposed to what we write now, and how. And of course, for any one thing you say, there's 10 exceptions. But in the most part, Golden Age mysteries were pure mystery. The whole goal of them was the puzzle. And if you think of Dorothy L. Sayers, who writes the last novel in the Peter Wimsey series, she apologizes for introducing romance and emotion into a puzzle. Well, that makes a little sense to a reader now, but from the point of view of the 40s or so, they had different expectations and rules, and I think now we want our characters in books to be three-dimensional. Agatha Christie is great when it comes to the puzzles, but her people are basically interchangeable. I mean, you could go through an entire book and say, okay, let's make this one the villain, and it would fit as well as any of them.
Mm-hmm.
With a modern story, most readers and editors, the editor being the primary reader, will say, I need to get a sense of this person as a person, not just their role in solving a puzzle. So yeah, when I am writing a book, I am looking at the characters as people, as not just an excuse to move dead bodies around a stage.
I'm wondering, is there anything that's nagging at any of you that you are thinking is there an emotional truth that you want to get out there right now? Something that's maybe going on in our world that you want to talk about?
I think that's a total softball question, and I'm sure that we all are outraged by where we are in 2021, and so the emotional truth that I always try to put in my books is it can be a good and attractive thing to do the right thing, to be a decent person. And that's what Reacher does. He's rough and tough, and he will kill you as soon as look at you. But he has his heart in the right place, and he will do the right and the honest thing. And that to me felt in the past a little bit goody-goody, but now I think absolutely it is something that is lacking. And it is, we are in a world full of the most disgusting and disgraceful people. And I wish that we could have some tiny, tiny, tiny little influence in making it a better place.
I heard you talk about how you were kind of surprised at first at how much women were drawn to the Jack Reacher character. But there is that sense of, this longing for justice. And in talking to some of my friends about this, that feeling of longing for justice feels higher than I've ever felt it.
Yes, it is. And there's a big sort of class and particularly gender disparity in how acceptable it is to show anger.
Yeah.
And I think that even now, 21st century, women find it difficult to express anger without being condemned in some way. And so, yeah, they use Reacher as a proxy. Reacher is doing what they would do if they were 250 pounds and 6'5" tall. That's what they would do. And they would live like he lives. That's the thing that actually surprised me most about the women's response, was that it wasn't just that they want to kind of know Jack Reacher, they want to be him. Exactly. They want to be able to walk away the next morning. They want to have no commitments, no responsibilities, live free. That seemed to be actually more passionately supported by women than men, which surprised me, because I thought men are traditionally the lazy responsibility shirkers, but it turns out that women are just the same.
Or fantasy, anyway.
Yeah, fantasy.
No, I think the idea of fiction in general as being a way of not only walking in other people's shoes, but thinking about the consequences of walking in people's shoes. And the idea of creating a character, a hero, who has honor. I think honor is one of those words that has become out of fashion.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
For those of us who write crime fiction, that's what we're writing about, is how do I function as an honorable person?
Yeah, and sometimes doing the honorable thing involves, in Jack Reacher's case, killing someone which seems
Beating the
contrary
crap
to the idea of honor, but he always does it for the right reasons.
Yeah, one of my books I found, just accidentally found a great piece of research, which was a gravestone in Texas for an old gunfighter called Clay Allison. And the writing on the tombstone said, he never killed a man who didn't need killing.
Yes, well, another thing is there are so many great mystery and thriller writers who are concerned with the concept of justice. And sometimes you have a resolution in a book, which is what the law allows, but it's not justice. Mm-hmm. And then your protagonist is really caught up in the dilemma whether he or she can actually bring about justice, even if it is outside the law. And that's where you get some of your most interesting questions.
Yeah, that was we were talking with Terry Jones earlier today, and she talked about moral ambiguity, and that brings, was it Tyari, Marnie, that was saying that that can be a source of really great character development and it keeps people engaged.
How many people write from a place of being pissed off?
I've always found it to be completely independent of my own personal mood. I can remember one year when I was feeling really, really happy. I was leaving Britain finally. I was immigrating to the US. Everything, I had a new deal. Everything was going great. It was one of the happiest years of my life. And that particular book that year, Reacher, was cantankerous and bad-tempered throughout. And then by contrast, I've had bad years personally where the book has turned out Reacher's very serene and in a good mood. So for me personally, it doesn't affect it at all.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
No, I try to play music or have television in the background as I'm writing. And I want something that actually shapes my mood as I'm going along. I can't listen to certain types of things, but if I can find the right music, then it works well.
What were you going to say, Laurie?
Oh, just I too find that the words on the page have very little to do with what's going on in my life. And even, I mean, I have tried for what Frankie was talking about. I've tried, I needed to write a section in one of my books. Is the protagonist is this kind of Breacher character. I mean, he's big and he thinks with his fists, and so I would read a whole section of one of Lee's books, or one of the real He-Man books, and I'd sit down to write, and I'd be Laurie King, and
that's a very significant point, because if I tried to write in the Sherlock world or about Mary Russell, it would be like Jacqueline Reacher. It would not. It just would not work, which sort of leads to an important point that sort of Neil was saying, really, is that there is nobody in the world better at you than writing your book. Mm-hmm. It is a completely unique proposition, and to try and imitate somebody is virtually impossible. You've just got to be true to yourself.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I have to say that, and I know, Lee, that Lee is fairly well known in the publishing world for making it difficult for his editors. Can I say that? Where some of us really value the input of editors, because as a primary reader, they see things that I'm not always aware that I've put in or that I'm aiming for. So that when I have a relationship with an editor who really knows what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do, when she or he looks at a story and says that it needs developing here, this is weak, they don't always know how to fix it themselves. But when they say that, 99 times out of 100, I say, I know how to fix that. Mm-hmm. And I agree with them once I've seen it. So here's a glass raised to you, Neil.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's true. I mean, because that is our job, is to be that first big outside critical eye. And like you've lived with that manuscript sometimes for a year, sometimes for 2 years, whatever. And some things just like they're embedded in your brain and you can't see the forest for the trees. And that's as long as it's an editor that you can trust to not, screw you up. Then you get that you say, huh, okay, but here I could probably do this better. And then the editor would say, that sounds even better. Go and do that, and then you work together and it grows and it gets to do a better thing. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're always supposed to be. It's just that first big critical eye and to offer suggestions and not requirements, because we know suggestions work best for you guys.
So Lee, what happens between you and your editors?
Well, I mean, I have a slight bone to pick with Laurie on a different subject here, but Neil, you're absolutely right that the editor is a critical first eye, that this is the first time it's out there in the world. And they see things that are not as good as they could be. And they tell you. And I'm incandescent with rage for about 24 hours. And then that fatal thing happens where you think, yeah, you know what? That could be right. And so in a way, the second 24 hours is even worse, because then you've got to admit, yeah, they're probably right. And then you do it. But the problem for me is, in contrast to what Laurie said, my first draft is essentially the book. That's what gets published. I never do rewriting other than accommodate any problem that the editor has identified and maybe clean up a couple of things. Although I usually do the cleanup before I send it in. I always have this dread that the book is going to be too short. And so by the time I reach the end of the book and it's long enough, I know that back in a third of the way through, there's a baggy scene that I've left in because I'm desperate to make the book long enough. And so I'll go back and take that out. So I do quite a lot of sort of cleanup, then I send it in, but that's basically the draft. And that's basically the final draft. And the editors, my editors, I've been so lucky all the way along that I've had really smart ones. And the smart ones are the ones that can diagnose, but do not tell you how to fix it. Because this is a team of specialists, and editors are not writers. And so a smart editor will point out the problem and not suggest a solution, because that will always produce the best result.
Laurie, do you find with editors, like when they point out a problem, is it when you said sometimes, is it kind of an aha moment, like I knew there was an issue here, or is it often catch you by surprise?
It's extraordinary how often my editors and I are on the same page. I will often write a cover letter to go with a first draft. And when I say first draft, it's usually the second or third, parts of it, the eighth, and, but it sort of vaguely resembles the book that's going to turn out there. And so I'll write a cover letter and say, I think it needs this and this, and I'm not satisfied with this, and let me know what you think of this. And quite often, if the editor avoids looking at that, their response letter to me will cover almost exactly the same points. So, I need feedback, but I rarely have an argument. I never go incandescent with rage, shall we say, because I always figure that they're right, which is always kind of depressing. But, it's one of those things that you read through the remarks, and I am old school. So I actually have print out pieces of paper that my editor writes remarks on. Which nobody does this anymore in the world, but that's how I do. I need it as a dialogue, and to have these remarks that are a response, not a suggestion, like Neil says. I mean, you don't want your editor saying you need another body in here, or that's the copy editor's job. And everybody knows you ignore the copy editor, right?
So we're getting lots of questions in. Our time is about to wrap up, but one of the questions we have that's caused a lot of squabbling, shall we say, is sensitivity readers. I really wanted to get your take on how you feel about sensitivity readers. If they're part of your process, if not at all, what's your thoughts? Any one of you?
Frankie, why don't you start us off with this?
Well, I have mixed feelings. I mean, a sensitivity reader. Well, as I said in the chapter, I may get into trouble with this. What I said in the chapter, about this is that when you're approaching someone about reading your short story or book, because you want that person to provide feedback about whether or not you're getting it right. One of the things you have to keep in mind, I don't know if I talked that much about it in the chapter, but that within groups, there is often more difference than across groups. So if you're looking at African Americans, for example, or Native Americans or whoever, within that group, there are all kinds of people. And so you can assume that if you have a sensitivity reader, that reader will be able to speak to, I mean, I don't represent African Americans. I'm me, I'm who I am. So my suggestion, if you're using a sensitivity reader, and if this person's a professional, probably would approach it that way, but that you ask that person, how might other people in this group who are different from you, who have different political views, different backgrounds, how might they respond to what you've written, so that that person can offer you his or her or their perspective on how other people in that group might respond, rather than just saying, I think this is right, or I think this is wrong. And they can suggest books you might read and other resources you might go to. And I've never worked with a professional sensitivity writer, so I don't know, how they approach this. I'm assuming that usually this would be people who come from a background where they are dealing with diversity and inclusion issues that they can point out when you're doing something really stupid. But even there, you might ask the question, how might a variety of people within this group perceive what I'm doing, rather than is this right or wrong? Because there is no right or wrong. It's, how various people might respond to it. Mm-hmm. Does that really answer your question? Yeah.
It's especially a problem in YA stuff. I mean, the publications committee at MWA has found a lot of problems that sensitivity issues, writing the other alternate voices and all the rest are really important considerations in young adult fiction. Adult fiction, you can get away with more. But even then, if your publisher has issues with it, that's something to deal with. So
I should add, though, when I do research, I mentioned that I'm going to be. I teach a course on race and crime, actually, so I do know something about Native Americans in terms of law enforcement. But when I deal with Quinn's family, he's not a member of the nation because he doesn't qualify, but with his mother and his stepmother, his mother and his stepfather and his sister, I'm going to actually go out and find people who are members of that nation and interview them and pose my questions, and then get them to read the sections of the book where this is relevant. Because, for example, the book begins Thanksgiving in Santa Fe, and the question of how Native Americans might respond to Thanksgiving. I know enough to know that I'm probably going to get that completely wrong unless I ask people to give me their points of view about this. So in that case, I would actually get various people to read and provide feedback.
I've never used a sensitivity reader. I rely on the actual readers, and they will let you know, and it's very instructive. I mean, I've had a lot of, I started out in the days of regular letters, fan letters, and then we all got websites and it went to email, and so you get a tremendous volume of stuff, and you can see where the trends are going. I mean, one book, Reacher, showed sympathy for a illegal immigrant family. one book he slept with a black woman. One book, he's sympathetic towards gays in the military. And I got a lot of negative stuff, but from the usual suspects. And so you ignore it. But the one thing that I did learn was that I had a habit of Reacher saying or thinking to himself, he was a pretty old guy, maybe 60 something. And I got a lot of mail from people saying 60 ain't old. I really learned from that, and especially now that I am over 60, I think damn right.
I know we have to wrap, but a number of questions are coming in about wondering if the child can comment about the Jack Reacher series becoming a TV show.
Yeah, it was. I was just there last week, wrapping it up for the end of the first season, and it is such a luxury to have all those hours to tell a story instead of basically 90 minutes. It's an incredible luxury. So it's going to be, as much as I've seen, which is less than I would have liked, because getting around with COVID has been very difficult this year. So I haven't seen as much as I wanted to, but it's looking great. And I completely understand the criticism of Tom Cruise in the role. Personally, I really liked Tom.
I did too.
Yeah, everything that you read about him in the media is really not true. And he's a real nice guy, and we had a lot of fun. And he's still a good friend. But he's 5'8", and that wasn't good enough. So for the TV, the actor is exactly right. And in fact, he looks exactly right. You can see him thinking on the screen. And I was talking to him, and it turns out that he's a big, tough guy. He's a little handsome, to be honest, for Reacher. I regard Reacher as plain looking, and all actors are good looking. But he's huge and he's physical. But the actual actor himself, when he was a kid, he was a seriously good chess player. I mean, international standard. And that was like a light bulb going off for me, because I can see that on the screen. So I think he's doing great, and it looks good, and I'm very happy with it.
When does it launch?
Well, we don't know. I mean, that will depend. It's Amazon Prime, and like everything in the world, it will depend on their data and algorithms. I think, given the post-production schedule and so on, it will not be this year, 2021, but I think it'll be very soon after the new year.
I have to say, we have some angry viewers that did not get to answer their questions, and we're wondering if we can send a couple of questions to you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to email, send them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And this
awesome.
book is a treasure.
You gotta get it.
It's the energy behind this book. You feel it. You felt it today in this discussion, giving you permission to find out what your path is. It's really powerful.
And I have to say, the other great thing about it is that it's they're essays. So you can, no matter how much time you have, you can sit down and read one. There's a one that's only one line long.
Paragraph, yeah.
Awesome. So it's amazing. And like I said earlier, it's the kind of book that is useful for any author. There's a whole section at the back of it on the business side with online stuff and the importance of reviews and building community, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, and I really wanted to, but just so many great tips. Anyway.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you in real life one of these years.
Absolutely.
Be amazing. Yes.
Come on down.
We hope you can all come back.
To San Diego.
We'll put you in a hotel in Coronado.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
That was fantastic.
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Almost a surreal way to end the day. Such beautiful, lovely writers sharing their love, their craft. Just
people at the top of their game, not being. Maybe it's because I've been in LA a lot, and they're just not bitter. They're so generous and so
nicest people. They're so nice. And I love that,
You know-
actually, that Lee Child talks about that in his beginning. He talks about that there's 2 attributes for a mystery. And he says that he finally figures out one of them must be that it has to be written by a nice person or a good person.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, our experience today, they're just such incredible generosity, as Marnie said.
Yeah. His voice, Lee Child's voice, is so fabulous.
And
It's
you can
just like
see where Jack Reacher
velvet.
comes from when you're
Yeah,
listening
totally.
to him and hearing his
Yeah.
story. You can
Mhm.
see.
And you,
God, there's so many questions I didn't get to ask.
I know. Well, he said we can
and
email
also,
him.
you can also get Laurie's characters from her personality too. It's
Totally. Yeah. And Frankie, I just love listening to Frankie talk about her process and that she's a slow writer. And it just like humanizes, like, you know, these people who we idolize, who are just these amazing writers putting out these incredible books. And it's like, well, guess what? They're just like us. They're writing their stories and the way they know how and sharing that with us. It's so cool.
I can't believe
Also-
that this is it. We're here.
I know. This is
What
it. We did
happened?
it. We did 3rd annual.